Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Party Invite Show. It's just two of us on deck tonight. Vilos is out, so I'm your host Tegan, and I'm joined by Obsydianyte.
Hello.
And the two of us are here to talk about something near and dear to our hearts. Something we've been talking about a lot over the entirety of this year. We're almost to November, and a lot of games that we've played this year have been asking. We've been asking ourselves the question: do betas still feel special? Do they make you feel special when you're in them? Whether you had to apply or got invited, or even something like an open beta. We're gonna dive into kind of what it means today to be a part of a beta or early access. Early access especially has a lot of different meanings. Same word, lots of meanings. So we're going to dive into that. But before we do that, because we're a community that celebrates games and the experiences of the people who play them, let's kick off my favorite segment, Blissin' Up. All right, it's Blissin' Up. It's an opportunity for the two of us and for everybody out in our community to talk about something that made them smile in gaming or non-gaming. Can be small, big, something you saw, something you did, something that happened to you. I want to pull one out that I saw when I was poking around the internet this week. I think it was earlier today. I was on the Baldur's Gate 3 group on Facebook. There's lots of good content on there. And somebody was celebrating that the game has localization to Ukraine. They talked at length at how important that was to them because a lot of games a lot of Ukrainian culture has been systematically created to trend towards Russian. So if you live in Ukraine, because Ukrainian culture and Russian culture are two different but similar things, and a lot of Ukrainians don't speak the native tongue. It's intentionally been tried. Russia has tried to disappear that culture for a while now, and a lot of games and news articles and outlets and all these things are usually written exclusively in Russian. So people in Ukraine have to accept any of the Russian localization that they get, and that's just how it is. There are a lot of game devs who work out of Ukraine that are not necessarily working against that actively as that's why they're in Ukraine, but this person was really celebrating how much they loved that they could celebrate and be comfortable in their own culture because Larian Studios took the time to localize it to them specifically instead of just making it in Russian, which they totally could have done, and the people in Ukraine could have still played it just fine. I really like that. And in a time where the world's in a lot of turmoil right now, that exact kind of story is what I needed. It's not something that happened to me, but it's something that makes me feel good. That it's an example of going out of your way when you have the resources to include everyone, even when you don't have to include them, even when it's not necessarily going to be more profitable to include them. I think that makes a big difference in the world. I think it inspires others to do the same, and I think that's worth signal boosting. So yeah, I just saw that today, and I really wanted to share that. Made me happy, and it really clearly made an impact on that person. So yeah, it's good stuff.
That's actually really cool. I mean, it seems like Baldur's Gate 3 has been like the pillar of progression in like a lot of ways. And in a lot of really good ways too. I remember one of the first tweets I saw about the game was how the character creation was like so intricate that she could literally make herself in the game, and she couldn't get that before because she doesn't have, like, in her words, she doesn't have like, the thin privilege or anything like that. She was a more like rotund woman. And she was like, this is the first game I actually like see myself in. I feel represented. And the way like that a lot of people, whatever their like bodily shapes or their, gender identities and things like that, whatever they feel, how they like to present themselves, how they like appear, they can just be like themselves as they want to be, as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me just really happy because you really, really do not see that in a lot of games, even games that feature um, really heavy customization options. They still have their limit. And I feel like Baldur's Gate just kind of eschewed that, and it opened up the doors to a lot of catharsis for people.
Yeah, and I think a lot about this. I listen. I mean, honestly, it was probably like a TED Talk or something I heard a while ago. I have started to listen to those a lot in the past couple weeks, and I'm like, oh right, this is why they're held in such high regard. I've listened to a lot of good episodes. But one of them was about self-reflection on your body and all these different things. This was a long time ago. I see. I can't even remember where it came from. But the idea that came from it was that, like, this is how I feel, and I'm don't expect that other people will feel this way, or that in the context you should even feel the same way as I do. But it's the idea that you can use fat and ugly are not synonymous. Likewise, I am very skinny. I've been very skinny my whole life. I actually need to go to the doctor and get my thyroid checked out because with the calories I'm eating, it's just something's got to give.
Wait, is
So
that something they can tell you? Because I think I have the same problem.
I,
Like,
I mean,
I could not gain weight like at all. I think we talked about this before, like
we
not on cast, but
Yeah, well, you should. I mean, with mine, it definitely runs in my family. My grandpa, who I am built just like, my mom has really been nudging me in the direction. She's like, "Hey, you saw what he did. When you were, probably too young to remember, he took these pills to regulate his thyroid, and he immediately got more towards the weight he was trying to get to, because he's always been rail thin, but not unhealthy. He was always very active." And all this stuff. But yeah, that is a real thing, and you might look into seeing if it runs in your family. But I wouldn't be surprised because you're like me, you're active and stuff. And it's not like, well, whatever. It's not like we are mistreating our bodies, but that's just the way our bodies are built. So it's the idea that, like, I am very comfortable with how skinny I am. Maybe I would feel different if, well, I could feel different for a lot of reasons. I'm not trying to make this a whole, I'm not trying to dump all of my life experience into the bliss and up segment of this show, but it's that I do feel comfortable with where my body's at. And if people tell me I'm skinny, that doesn't mean that I can't also look good, And the other side of that, which I understand is different, is that if people say that someone's fat, that does not mean that they are unattractive, or certainly they shouldn't view themselves that way. Again, it's the two very different situations, but two sides of the spectrum. The idea is that, like, if someone calls me skinny, that is an observation, not a judgment. And I wish that it wasn't, I wish there was more room for nuance on the other side of the spectrum when someone's much bigger. That just because someone is big, any synonym for the word fat, does not, that's not a judgment. That is, a statement or an observation. And I wish there was more room in our cultural conversation for beauty and fatness to be a little more, to live a little closer and comfortably in our dialogue, the way that skinny and beauty tend to live side by side, even when skinny and beauty can be intentional unhealthiness,
yeah.
But that's a whole huge conversation. But that just does remind me that because that's come up in my life a lot lately, and I want to do something about it. I'm here in my 30s, and there's for most things across my life, the best time to make any change is right now. Really, the best time is yesterday, but today's the best I can do.
Unless you got a time machine.
That's right.
This is supposed to be the future. Why don't we have that yet?
Oh man, well, we're working on it. I did hear a funny. I listened to a lot of really enlightening stuff on artificial intelligence over the past few weeks. In fact, we were talking about it in our Discord. For those interested, I'll link it later in chat. It's a series on Freakonomics Radio, a wonderful podcast. It's a 3-part series on artificial intelligence. But it's funny looking back on predictions of the future. We were talking about the time machine, looking at predictions of where the future will be. And there were people predicting in the 60s and 70s that by the 90s, no humans would even have jobs anymore because robots would just make them completely obsolete. By the 90s, they predicted.
Wow.
And
I mean, George Jetson was supposed to be born like 3 or 4 years ago, right? So
oh, was he really?
yeah, I think his birthday is like in the 2020s.
Lol. Man, it's funny what our visions of the future look like and how different the reality often is. But
It's actually funny that you bring that up, though, because I just saw a movie called The Creator, which centers around that very thing. Like about like an AI that, like, somebody designed an AI and they thought it would be like taking over the planet and things like that. And then there's like this whole, it's basically like an omnic crisis where the AI and like the simulants who are like more human-like AIs are like fighting for their freedoms because there's like the whole, it's a big thing. It's basically an omnic crisis. I actually thoroughly enjoyed the movie. It was kind of thinky, and I feel like there's a message there that maybe could have gone over my head. Like I feel like there's some kind of like East and West parallel correlation, like allegory going on. But I just like the movie. So, if that kind of ordeal is something that you're interested in, I don't know how much longer it'll be in theaters because it was only like 2 show times when I went.
Oh,
Maybe check it out.
R.I.P.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Odysseus in chat said Cyberpunk 1877, and yeah,
Oh
that's
Lord.
that's putting hard numbers on stuff is just really funny. We could have a whole conversation on like all of the times that, in fact or fiction or in earnest or in jest, people put numbers on something like this, and it was just completely opposite the expectations.
I think that's why I like how Mega Man did like 20XX because that could be. We still have so many years before that's obsolete.
That's the way to do that. Yeah, Undertale did that at the beginning. It was like 1980X was when it's supposed to take place.
Speaking of hard numbers, though, my listen up is I was playing Titanfall the other week with our good friend Cam, and some of our mutual friends. Ray Apollo was there, and then I met some of Cam's friends. We all played Titanfall together, Titanfall 2, because it's like this big resurgence happening. I guess they did like some kind of update to the game or something, and everybody's coming back, and the servers are like popping. And for the first time, because I streamed this, because of course I did, and for the first time, I played through the campaign because I played through Titanfall 1, and I didn't get Titanfall 2 because I was on a budget, and I really wanted to get like the big collector's edition that came with like the 3 foot tall like
oh my gosh, I was on a
Titan.
budget and I wanted the max extra combo deluxe.
Right. So I didn't buy it. Look, the first time I actually exerted like self-control. Now I just buy whatever $100 founders pack comes my way. Like it's fine. But back then I had some restraint. Uh, so I didn't buy it, and now it's free or on Game Pass, which I found out I was paying doubly for because I guess you get the EA pass if you have Game Pass Ultimate,
Indeed.
and EA lets you know that. I didn't know that, so I signed in to download the game, and it was just, hey, you're like doubling up. You want to fix that?
You want to like
And I was
chill?
like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I'll fix that.
That's funny.
I,
That feels uncommon for them to be like, "Hey, we're just looking out for you."
yeah, for EA of all people. Like, we like taking your money, but like, can you maybe cancel your Xbox one and then just pay us? Maybe that's what they're saying. But no, I heckin' canceled my EA one and I'm paying Xbox because it's better. So hashtag Game Pass. Anyway, I started playing the game and I played through the campaign for the first time. And the day that we decided to do this together, play Titanfall, was actually the main character's birthday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you like load up the game and he's like there's like the UI, he's like wearing this headset and it's like accessing vitals and like gives his full name, his government name and his birthday. And I believe it was on this, what day was it? The 6th? I think it was the 6th, but it was October 6th. That was his birthday. And I was like, wow, we're literally playing this on his birthday. And I told Cam and he had like a good laugh about that too, because it wasn't planned at all. Or at least the way he said it made it sound like it wasn't planned. But I don't know. After I'm thinking about it now, maybe it could have been.
Yeah.
All that to say, it got me curious about video game birthdays. How many video game birthdays like do we know? And one of the games that prominently features birthdays that I play is Animal Crossing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I wonder who I share a birthday with in Animal Crossing. And there are 2 characters, Victoria and Philly, who are both born on July 11th. We share a birthday together. And I was born, this is actually really funny. I was born in the lunar calendar in the year of the horse, right?
The year of the horse.
The year of the horse. I'm the year of the horse. If you want to get real fancy with it, I'm a metal horse because there's like each year has like an animal and then like an element aligned to it. And if you want to get really fancy, I was born in the year of the golden horse. So I'm like I'm basically like the best horse you can be, y'all. I'm just saying, putting that out there.
Wow.
I mean, surprising no one, obviously. But
Obviously.
I say that because both of these characters, Victoria and Philly, are horses. How crazy is that? And they're one of the only few characters that have like July 11th is one of the only few days that animals have two characters have. Like there's one for every day of the year, and then only some have 2 animals that have a birthday on that day, right? So that made me happy.
Nice.
I just thinking about video game birthdays and, like, looking up, delving into, like, the birthday realm and finding out all the information. I thought that was cool. So, I kinda wonder now who shares a birthday. Like, I want y'all to look up your like, forget your zodiac sign. Look up your Animal Crossing birthday twin.
Your Animal Crossing birthday. That's great. I mean, the like fun statistic. It's like when you get like 50 people in a room or something. Uh there's like a very high chance of two of those people sharing a birthday. Even though they're 365 days in a year and all this stuff. I'd have to look it up. It's been a long time since I actually said those numbers out loud, so oops. But I always thought that was such a neat. It's like not a fallacy. I forget what the word is there, but it's like it doesn't meet your expectations at all.
Hmm.
A lot of things are like that, huh?
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah, maybe I should look up birthday stuff. It's fun when you play the tabletop game Betrayal at the House on the Hill. When you pick up your character card thing, it has a birthday on it, and you can use that or your own birthday when it says, "Hey, at the beginning of the game, you figure out turn order by whoever has the closest upcoming birthday." And I feel like that's always like a fun kind of randomizer or just a moment to look around and kind of it's almost like an icebreaker hidden in the game to just be like, hey, what's your
Yeah.
birthday? Of course, if you only play games like that at the holiday, then one person is probably going to win every time. And then you definitely go off the cards instead of the players. But yeah, that's fun. Are getting to the holiday season. Maybe we'll pull that back around and be like, yo, who's got birthdays with the famous character?
I mean, we could play that on, like, Tabletop Simulator or something. That would be a fun stream.
That would be a fun stream, and that game rules.
It's so good.
It's so good. Yeah. Let's see if we can make that happen. Okay, well, let's talk about some beta stuff, huh?
I don't know anything about that because I'm an alpha. No, I'm just imagine actually buying into ideology.
Oh my gosh. Well, so our topic today is whether or not betas still make you feel special. So Sid, you know a thing or two about betas. Let's talk about our experiences with what we call betas and early access, and we'll kind of start this conversation by getting into the definition or the lack of definition between these two things. What did they used to mean? What do they mean today? But let's start first with your experiences with betas in the past. What have you played, and when you played them, what did it entail?
So for me, like a beta, it's like, they have like a special date, right? They're just like, hey, this game is only going to be available from, such and such date to such and such date. Come in and test out the game, and you'll get like special feedback. You'll get, interaction with some of the devs sometimes. And a game that really exemplifies this is, I think, Knockout City. Not only because it was just like an indie developer as well, so they were really receptive to the feedback, but they had multiple betas over multiple periods of time instead of just having like, I don't know, like a year-long early access or something, which really allowed them to fine-tune um, the game to, their not only their expectations, but something that the player base would enjoy, right? But then you also get stuff like, and this is really common for Nintendo Switch games, like Splatoon, which had like the what's it called, test fire periods.
Mhm.
So these are games which are unilateral, right? You don't get to provide whatever feedback you have to the developers. You just get to play what they have set on the table for you and kind of deal with it, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you can go online and like be on Twitter and be like, "Wow, this is sucky," blah blah blah. It's fine. Do your keyboard warrior thing, or "Wow, this is great." It doesn't have to be negative. In most cases, Nintendo games don't have negative betas, in my experience. Um,
Are
but then
you
you
are
have
you
things like,
biased, or are they, you know?
I, listen, I'm the avatar of the four gaming nations. I don't choose one over the other. I like all platforms equally. I just play Nintendo more.
That's fair. You do play across the platforms more than I do. I am almost exclusively PC these days.
Yeah.
Barely even play my PS5, and I haven't touched my Switch. That thing is always dusty now. Poor guy.
Yeah, that's the same for my PS4. So I'm
Rip.
I'm in that boat with you. Yeah.
Uh
Although with Film Stars coming out, which also did have a beta period that I
oh,
enjoyed, That could change if I can get my hands on a PS5 somehow.
Well,
Um,
similar to what you just described, I didn't play in this, but Halo Infinite had flights, they called them, which seemed to be a mixture of, hey, is this going to work? Like, you know, is anything going to break? But also, how are the servers going to hold up? I think more than anything, it was more about the servers. But like you said, that wasn't really designed for feedback. That was just like, hey, is the structure going to fall apart the second we turn the lights on? Um, and that only lasted a few days, maybe a week, maybe. But I didn't participate in that. I only heard about it.
yeah. There was, something like that for Pokemon Unite as well. I think they actually called it the server test. Like, in the Japanese one, you could see, like, the label, and I think it said, like, Saba Testo, like, in the katakana, alphabet.
Why make
So
it complicated?
right, I mean, they know what they wanna do, so, I mean, just put it out there, so at least, players will know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the window of expectation is, like, so blurry, and we're just like, "What are we doing here?
Right.
What's happening?" I mean, especially nowadays, because players are so I feel bad saying this, but a lot of players online, especially with, like, the review systems and stuff, it feels kind of like they're entitled. Like, yeah, they're playing this game early
I
access,
know.
and they have all these expectations for what a beta should be, and then the instant those aren't met, bam, they go to the reviews, bam, they go to the discords, bam, they go to, like, Reddit, and it's so sad to see the climate of early access and beta like nowadays?
Indeed. And it's not every game, but you can certainly anticipate which types of games with which types of player bases are going to act like that. Um, you know, we could be snarky and name some of them, but at the end of the day, I think it's a lot of people who've only played really big AAA games that don't know what development is like, don't have any experience in a beta that has content that's not ready for release yet. And unfortunately, those people can be very loud. It is especially frustrating when someone who does have a lot of influence can use that influence in a negative way. Where there could be an opportunity to show people a new game, but instead they jump in and they're like, man, this just ain't as good as the main game I play, which has been out for 5 years. It's like, well, of course it's not. One game that I played the beta of probably 10 years ago, give or take, maybe a little less than that, was Elder Scrolls Online. I played a closed beta of that lasted like 3 to 5 days or something. I was able to make a character and revisit it a few days after school, and then maybe I think I want to say maybe a Saturday and Sunday. But there's always that moment. So Elder Scrolls Online is, of course, an MMO, so there's a certain special kind of energy that you get when you're in an environment like that, where everyone can just run around this open world with their own avatars and spells and chat and all this stuff. Um, and we talked long, long ago about on this podcast about kind of like the finality that some video games offer. And so like that moment that the text box appears that's like server shut down in 15 minutes. Ah! Everyone loses their minds. And everybody's running to the city, they're jumping, they're shooting off fireworks, they're doing whatever they can. And those things are so exciting because you know that this beta test that you're in is going to end. And in that case, the character that you've been making over these days will be deleted, because when the game eventually comes out, it will be a different version of the game, a more hopefully complete version. But you go into those betas knowing that it's all temporary. None of the stuff that you carry with you will stay with you. And I think that used to be the norm. Sometimes you still see that based on the framework of an early access, but I think much more modern games, especially bigger games, will be like, hey, we're really trying to entice a lot of you to play this, so one of the carrots we're going to dangle in front of your face is that anything you do today will carry over to your main story. I think Baldur's Gate even was a game that had that said, hey, some stuff will carry over, but then there were some pretty game-breaking bugs that a few people experienced, so it seemed like generally the
Um,
recommendation was just start a fresh save file. And if I was in their shoes, that's what I would have done anyway. I would have said, I want to see every little bit of this game that's new. I'm going to restart. Of course, not every game's like that, so it's a different situation. But Yeah, Elder Scrolls Online was the last real beta that I can think of that I played personally. But I really enjoyed it. It was partially to test the servers, to just get a ton of people online, because they had 2 or 3 different betas. This was, I think they had 3 betas, and this was the second of 3. And each time, so this was important back in the day. Each time they'd say, "Hey, we're gonna do a beta. Who wants in?" And it was a combination of who got in first, who could click the link and sign up, but also part lottery. So once enough people had signed up, they would switch to a lottery system, and you just have to have your name pulled. And a lot of times they would want such a huge number of people playing that most people would have their name pulled. It would be uncommon, based on the circumstances, for you to submit, to say that you wanted to join and not get in. But that would happen. So you did kind of feel exclusive when you got in. And I always felt like I had an obligation. I'm like, well, my number came up, so I have to play. Likewise, like, don't sign up for stuff if you can't make it. Don't enter a contest to win concert tickets if you can't go to the concert, But that was a really fun thing, and it felt like I had an obligation to the developer. They let me play their thing early to give feedback. So that's exactly what I wanted to do. We found a couple bugs in there. There was a very easy to use like bug reporting feature. And so it made me feel like I was really helping with development, because you've got a game that big that they need help figuring that stuff out. I've got a quote from Baldur's Gate I want to read in a minute, because I do want to circle back, because there's a lot to talk about with the early access there. But what other old school closed betas have we both played? Well, have we each played that fit kind of that old definition? More closed, fewer people. It's all about feedback. You kind of feel like you are helping build and develop this game, or guide development.
Right. I mean, that definition almost works for, like, I guess, alphas now, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the modern day beta of our time would be an alpha, because, like, they're so much more intimate, and it's almost like the lottery system, but I think it actually is mostly lottery system now, for alphas, because everybody could just get into a beta now. You could just watch Twitch, get a drop,
Uh-huh.
you'll get into the beta, and things like that. But alphas, those are basically what we had, back, like what you're describing. But gosh, I play so many betas, like, in the past.
You play
It's hard
so
to, like
many
I
betas.
played so many. But I feel like the last time I truly felt like I was in, like, a closed beta, like what you're describing, is actually a Steam game called Monaco, What's Yours Is Mine.
Mm-hmm.
It is a top-down heist game. It's not pixelated, but it is pixelated, if that makes any sense. It's like
What is this game called?
Monaco, like the city, colon, What's Yours Is Mine. Back then, it was
Okay.
just called Monaco, but then, they added the surtitle, I think, like, if it wasn't unreleased, it was in, like, in a major update.
And for the record, I totally knew how to spell Monaco the city, because I definitely knew that was a city. Wait, did I
Cool.
give myself away?
If you didn't, that's what the show's about, because, we're always doing that edutainment.
Where is Monaco? Well, because now I have to know.
Actually don't know.
Oh, geez. Okay, Monaco. Where you at? Monaco is a sovereign city-state and microstate on the French Riviera, west of the Italian region, yada yada, on the Mediterranean Sea. Gosh, there are a lot of proper nouns in this. It is bordered by France to the north. Okay, so
Well, I
it's
mean,
a
that does make
sovereign
sense, because
city-state.
the game did take place across, like, a multitude of, like, that section of Europe.
This sounds like
So,
a very interesting place to be. I'll tell you.
well,
It's
there was a lot of stuff to steal, I could tell you that much, like it was, I think, one of the earliest, like, exposures to, like, the heist genre that I can remember, right?
Mhm.
And this was so interesting, the way that they had you enter for this closed beta. So this was back when, like, Facebook was, like, the prominent way to reach people, right? I think it was even back when, instead of liking a post or a page, you became a fan. Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah, you became a fan of a page. You didn't like it, like if I were to go to like, a game like Pokemon, I would go like their page, right?
Mhm.
But back then it was become a fan. So
Become a fan.
right, it was so long ago. And the way that they did this is it was still a lottery system, but they'd be like, if you want closed out or access to this closed beta, this is what you have to do. Like you didn't send in your email, you didn't like, become a fan or anything. I mean, yes, become a fan, but they had you submit a creative writing excerpt in the comments.
Right,
Yeah.
naturally.
And this is actually so fun to do. So what they would do is
Oh, here we go.
choose one of the class characters because as a heist you all had your roles. There was like the face, the charm, the hacker, all that. And uh the one that I chose was the cleaner. And what the cleaner did was basically knock people out with chloroform so you could just bypass people.
Well,
like actually, so I think back then it was called the janitor, but then they changed it to cleaner. Uh, and I wrote a creative excerpt about the cleaner. Creative writing was one of like my sub major, I guess. What do you call that in college? Like it's not your major, like your main major, but it's like your
gosh, it's been a long time since I thought about that.
yeah. Well, I mean, because my
Someone
first
out there
major
is
was
screaming at
in graphic
us.
design. So I like to say I got a
A
degree in
minor?
Photoshop.
It's just a minor?
A minor, maybe?
Yeah, that
I,
sounds
I
right.
guess so.
Oh,
Yeah. So I minored
echoes in
in
chat.
creative writing. So I was just like,
You're like, what did I do again?
I went to the comments and I wrote, an excerpt on the cleaner, and that's how I got in. And it was so much fun to do. Not only that, but then the people that were chosen were so passionate about the project because they like chose like the most creative writing, I guess you could say, writers to get in there. And then once they got in there, we all provided our feedback, and I even found like a game breaking bug, like it broke the game, you could not play. And
So you wrote a
that
1,000-word essay on how you would fix it.
only 500. No. But like all that to say, it was such an intimate experience that lasted for such a limited time that's what I feel like encapsulates the betas of that time period.
Mhm.
You don't get experiences like that with like major AAA like games anymore. Not that Monaco was like a AAA game. Um, but I mean, you were describing that experience with like Elder Scrolls, right? Which I also did play. I played a bard, and I remember not a bard, but like I played as a bard. I role played as a bard, and one of the things I did was I would just go to like major places and like play my loot emote,
Uh-huh.
and then
Uh-huh.
people would like come around and do their dance emotes and then go on their way. Like it was fun. It was fun to do.
I love that stuff.
But
The kind of those moments. Lizzie plays Elder Scrolls on a regular basis, and she just unlocked something cool the other day. We even tried. There was something extra cool, and I was like, "Oh, we should just spend money." I was like, "Can I just gift this to you?" Because I thought about getting on there and trying to just buy it for her while she wasn't home. But it actually required a special currency that you can only get if you buy like a ton of loot boxes. And I'm like, man, I just wanted to buy the thing. Whatever. This is not really what I came here to talk about, but that did happen the other day. But she has
top 10 anime betrayals for real.
oh my gosh, there are lots of emotes in there that are seasonal too. The Halloween ones happening right now are really cool. And so, even when we're playing Baldur's Gate 3, you can pull out, our loot. He's got a drum. He's got a flute. And so it's just super fun to kind of create your own ambiance to be in there and be like, hey, I'm playing my instrument. Somebody get over here. And then somebody walks up, and then suddenly you got the whole band playing. Especially in Elder Scrolls, all you have to do is type like /flute, I think. At any time you could pull out any of the preset instruments, because that was another thing I remember doing right before the clock went up. When it was like, hey, you got 15 minutes till the end of the world. What are you gonna do? And it's like, all right, somebody come up on this hill and play music with me.
Play Green Sleeves, my lord.
Not again. But
I
yeah,
miss betas like that so much.
those
What's actually
moments
really
are
funny
so
about
fun.
participating in that, the Monaco one, is that they put my name in the credits. And that's
Okay,
something,
that's
yeah, like
pretty cool.
not like my full government name too. So it's not like Coromon where like it's like my handle, like on the Wikipedia, like this, contribution was provided by at the time, Sovereign Sid.
Mhm.
Like, no, they put my full government name in there. So that was really neat. Like if you Google my name, if you know my name, if you Google it, it's going to be one of the results still. And I can't remember how long
That's
ago
cool.
that was. So that's there forever. And that's something that betas don't really have anymore either. Is like those really lasting
Hmm.
moments and memories. I mean, now you can get like a profile picture or like a special title or something like a player card that you can carry over. Or like you said, you might have data that carries over and things like that.
I think
But
part of
you
that.
don't get like permanent stuff like a pin, like physical, tangible things like a pin, like an enamel pin, or like a postcard, or like a poster, like something like that. Those don't really kind of, as far as I know. I mean, I could be wrong, but I haven't seen
I
anything
certainly
that does
don't
that
hear about them.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, because yeah, you'd have in like the early days of indie games, you'd have I believe that The Binding of Isaac has a lot of that stuff, and maybe Meat Boy does. I can't remember. I haven't seen the end of either of those games, but
I
people.
think the last game that I remember having like tangible stuff like that you're saying is Knockout City. Like I have like a pin collection back there
Oh yeah,
from something that they did.
you
But
know,
yeah, I think you're right.
totally different scenario, but similar vibe when that legendary Elden Ring character, Let Me Solo Her, got the actual sword in the mail, you
That was
know,
so cool.
from Software. Like that stuff, you're just like, okay, that's amazing. Like that's super memorable. Of course, that is almost extra special because that happened after release. That this person just, who is anonymous to the rest of the world, just by their username, um, had such an impact that they were like, okay, this person's part of the zeitgeist. We got to send them something. But I feel like there used to be so much smaller teams, and like QA testing was a whole lot different than it is now in a lot of ways. Because you'll have like internal what is it, quality assurance QA testing,
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
that does all sorts of different things depending on the size and scope of the game and the company you're working for. um, but then you've got the like early access beta players who can sometimes fill that role. Sometimes there's a lot of overlap. Sometimes it's one or the other. There won't be a lot of QA. Like there won't be a whole team of QA testers. They'll just make sure that it can get out the door and make sure that players like it, right? Like get it available to people like you had said who care a whole lot, who can get their hands on it and confirm this is actually fun. Because you don't want to spend a ton of time developing a game that plays okay but is actually not very fun to play. So being included in that conversation feels so special, and then getting credited on it, you can look back and say that you had a big role in that. Okay, I mentioned that I wanted to say this earlier because I think this very succinctly shows kind of what early access can mean here. I pulled this from Baldur's Gate 3 FAQ. It's from Steam. This is from about 3 years ago. But they said, why are we doing early access? This is Larian Studios. They said, we've learned that working directly with our players during development makes our games better. RPGs this large with so many permutations thrive from feedback as new features and fixes are incrementally added to the game. Early access gives players a chance to participate in development, and it gives us an opportunity to explore different game ideas with a live community. We want to learn how you play the game and use that to make it a better experience for everyone. So that was like 3 years ago. The Baldur's Gate 3 early access, which, as far as I know, lasted from, I had it written here, October 6th of 2020, so 3 years ago, through the release. As far as I know, early access was basically playable the entire time during that time. Chat, please correct me if I'm wrong. What they continued to say, the FAQ was really interesting to read. They were like, we expect that this early access period will last, at least a year or so. And, a lot happened between now and then. The game underwent a lot of changes based on feedback. And in fact, the CEO of Larian said in an interview that the earliest iterations of the game really weren't very good at all. That players were like, this actually is not, that's not that fun. Like, this isn't really a game I want to pay $60 for, which they already did pay $60 for, because that's how
Oh
you got
no.
early access. So Larian said, okay, we're gonna make these changes based on your feedback, and we're gonna turn it into the game that you want to play. And they did. So it took them 3 years, working through COVID and all that, to have their release in August/September of this year, depending on your platform. but now it's in a great place. I'm happy to announce that after 60 hours, I believe we are finished with Act 1 uh,
Oh my gosh.
in our co-op playthrough. We were almost done, and Odysseus was like, there is one more place we could go. So then we spent the rest of our like 7-hour session in this crazy huge place that it's insane to me was totally optional. In fact, the place we were in before we even got to that place was also optional, and we spent like 6 hours in it. That game is just massive.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah, and a lot of this Act 1 that we're, just wrapping up was available in early access. Not everything, but most of what early access was this first act in air quotations that we're about to be done with. So the early access portion was huge, and we still have so much game ahead of us. Whether it'll take us 60 hours times 3 to get through all 3 acts is to be determined, but they said with RPGs this large with so many permutations, they thrive from feedback and incremental additions to the game. And 100%. A conversation for another time would be, would a game like Starfield or even like Redfall have benefited from a long early access period of something like that? You have a game like Starfield that uses what I would call the modern version of early access, even though they have multiple definitions at the same time. Bear with me. The Starfield version of early access is that you pay extra money or you pay the full price ahead of time, or maybe a collector's edition, to unlock the game 7 days early. Starfield was 7 days, 7 days early. Call of Duty did something. I don't know which game it was, but I know somebody out there does. This is a similar business model that I actually like, that says, hey, if you like this game enough, you're not going to be more powerful at the game. Like if you're playing a multiplayer game, you're not going to be better. Maybe you'll have some cool skins and stuff, but this really just says you like the game enough that you want to be on the bleeding edge of this 1.0 release. And so I'm fine with that. I think that's a great carrot on the stick to entice people to pay for a collector's edition or whatever, because it's not like it's DLC, or it's not like they're just gating the real game behind the extra paid content. Because I didn't pay for Starfield, I got it on Game Pass, and I'm happy I did. I'm glad I did not pay $60 or $70 for 7 days, quote unquote, early access, because that version of early access was not looking for players' feedback, which is okay. Like, I'm not trying to say that one is inherently better than the other. They're two different things. But Starfield wasn't looking for my feedback. Their game was done already. They just wanted to give people an opportunity to feel special if they, paid extra money to be part of kind of the elite crew, so to speak. To say, hey, maybe this is the one full price game you're going to buy this year. Go big or go home. Pay this and you'll get 7 days early access. Could Starfield have spent some more time in the oven? Sure. But they'll probably be developing it for the next 10 years. So in another way, you could say that, like, same with Skyrim, that any version of that game before the 10-year anniversary edition was basically just a long early access period. You paid full price for the game and you got the game, but the best version of it came out after lots and lots of player feedback and further development with actual additional brand new content and all this stuff. It's easy to be really snarky in this conversation. I'm going to try not to actually be snarky. But it is funny how this definition has changed so dramatically. So, talked about Baldur's Gate. I still think it's funny that they were like, yeah, we'll probably be doing this for a year or so. And then 3 years later, they're like, actually, now we're ready to reveal our final form. And I think that was the best move, And so I'll jump in here at any time because I can keep talking.
No, you're fine.
Cool.
No, I'm thoroughly enjoying, like, literally just listening to your perspective on this, because I was left in the dark for so long about, first of all, the Act 1 thing. And what I was thinking was that their 1 year estimation into a 3-year actuation was like the perfect parallel between, oh yeah, we're going to do Baldur's Gate 3. It's going to be fine. Like, it's fine. Act 1's great. We're good. And then it's just like 3 years later, and we're now almost done. We're just wrapping up Act One,
I
and I just
swear. No, this time for real. For real. Man, for sure. Like, what a great parallel there. Yeah, because there is so much game, and as a developer, I feel like I'd be so overwhelmed to just, especially under crunch, which is so rampant in the games industry, to produce this product that really just needs a long time to cook. You don't need to turn up the heat; it just needs to bake for longer. That's it. And that's what we got here. So we got Baldur's Gate 3 game rules. Um, but
well, in the matter of like modern quote unquote early access games like Starfield, where you get like the early access early on, like a couple of days later,
Mhm.
it's like a double-edged sword, because if you get that on digital, great, cool, fine, you are definitely guaranteed that early access like gate pass. You're going to be playing the game earlier than anyone else.
Mhm.
But like if you do it for like a physical edition, like say on a console or like some kind of collector's edition and stuff, there's a lot of instances where, depending on where you order from, you might not get that until after the game releases.
Dude,
So
that happened to a
yeah,
bunch of people. I mean, that happened to Vilos with Starfield. He paid for the extra special edition, and which was supposed to give him 7 days early access, and it arrived like 9 days after he was supposed to have it. Like, yikes!
yeah,
Oh boy,
yeah.
those were dark days.
That's because there's no stars. He didn't have any stars.
That's right.
His field was empty
He was
for 9 days.
starless. Um,
But then, I mean, like, I can't really like put a peg in. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Like with modern games that do that, but don't have physical things. I don't think, like, for instance, Mortal Kombat had an early access period, but I don't think that they had like physical, like tangible mailed to you stuff. They had like extra skins and stuff. And I think the same thing happened with like Injustice as well. You could get like early access and you'll get like special skins and shaders for those skins and things like that. Mortal Kombat had a traditional beta period. It was like 3 days. They were like, tell us what you think of the game. Does it work? How's it work? Are there bugs?
mhm.
I mean, there's still bugs. I mean, that was one of the biggest things that was going around the other week, right? Was like this player one port pre-order bug. But at the time they were getting the feedback and all that whatnot. That was a traditional beta period, like we were talking about earlier. And then, um, like 5 days before the game released, you could like if you got like the Ultimate Edition or whatever they called it, you could play it like 5 days before the actual release of the game in September. And Bob's your uncle. So you don't
What?
really
Bob's your uncle? What are you saying?
Bob's your uncle. You've never heard that before?
I don't think so.
It's like I'm not actually like it's an idiom that means like there you have it, right? The whole thing is Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. And I think it comes from like across the pond, quote unquote, as it were, like, Britain land. Uh,
Right, right.
so I mean, I guess it makes sense. Bob's your uncle's a weird American idiom to have, right?
There are a lot of idioms are weird. Idioms are pretty weird. But I gotta look that up. Bob's your uncle. All right, I'm putting that in the bank.
Oh, I hope it doesn't have like problematic origins like a lot of idioms that we use today do.
Well, just the stats would say it probably does.
Probably does.
But we're gonna, we'll look it up.
We're
do our
reclaiming it. We're fine. Yeah, it's
due
fine.
diligence.
We'll be fine.
Oh my goodness. Lord Chrome in chat says, my buddy bought the special Spider-Man edition with a console, and Sony canceled his pre-order days before release. I saw that. I know who's talking about. That
I do too.
is painful.
Yeah.
So that's a problem with distribution, but that problem wouldn't have even happened if the whole point wasn't you pay extra, not the same even, but extra to get the special version. And not only does it not come early, in his case, it didn't come at all, with no sort
And I
of
don't think
like,
that got refunded. I don't think I think that money's just gone, right?
well, even if it's not, like, he lost more than just the money that he would have spent on the game. Like, now he has to go through the effort to do this other stuff. But since it's such a big game, I mean, fat chance that Sony's going to be like, hey, here's a $10 gift card. We're sorry about messing this up.
Here comes the wall of text. Like
Yeah. Right. Here's a JPEG directly in your email inbox. Yeah, and he probably took time. Yeah, there were people. I think Vilos was one of the people who took time off to play Starfield, and the game didn't arrive. So he just had 2 days off or however many, where he was just like, welp, totally wasted. And I had considered taking time off for Starfield. So it does have an impact on people's lives just beyond, inconvenience. But I digress. But you're right. Yeah, when there's like some special, usually you'll get a bundle that has, well, actually, I'll point at Endless Dungeon. Gosh, I wrote a 2 here because I'm going to talk about Darkest Dungeon 2. This is Endless Dungeon. It's confusing. Endless Dungeon is a game that just came out. Its full release happened like last week. I want to say 2 weeks ago, maybe. And I looked up the timeline on this. So this one is like a great example of a game that has all of the versions of what we have described as a beta or early access. So Endless Dungeon just came out. It said, reading online, it said that there was an open beta, an actual open beta last November of 2022. So that came out. A bunch of people played it. I thought that was, just reading about it, it seems like a great marketing ploy to be like, hey, come like test drive our game. So maybe you'll buy it when it comes out. But more importantly, you'll know about it. Like it'll be something that you're aware of out in the world. So people play this open beta last week. And then in the following January, which would have been January of this year, they had a 12-day, what did they call it? I think they called this an early access period. So this was for people who bought the special last wish edition of the game. So these are the people. I couldn't find a price tag on this, but the base game is $30. I imagine that this bundle was either $50 or $60. But this bundle,
Well, if it's not 100, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, right. You're like, I'm not even interested. The entire bundle came with the 12-day early access period that I mentioned. It got access to a closed beta that I couldn't seem to figure out when that happened, but it was a proper closed beta that happened sometime in the past 10 months. And then when the full release came out, these people who paid for this extra edition got 2 days to play before everybody else, which again, I think is great as long as they can actually play, unlike those other stories. And then they additionally, this is all in the same bundle, got the original soundtrack, like they own it, an art book, and they got some in-game skins. So that sounds like a fun bundle. You got 2 extra times, well, technically 3 extra times to play before everyone else without even having to sign up, because there was that open beta. So this game had an open beta, and then a short early access period. Then it had a closed beta, and then it had a 2-day, also called early access period. So this game, Endless Dungeon, had it all. And looking at this is it's a nice, wrapped in a little box, or in a bow wrapped with a, in a box wrapped with a bow. I can't even say my metaphors. It's a nice way to look at this conversation because it takes each piece of what we've seen to define these things over the past 10, 20 years, and it has them all for one game. If you want to be more confused, this game is not a sequel, but it's Endless Dungeon is based off of the dev's previous game called Dungeon of the Endless. So yeah, we're getting in the weeds here. But the game's cool, by the way. We checked it out. It's $30, I think, on every platform. Doesn't have crossplay, but it's a pretty cool game. It's 3-player. So Endless Dungeon seems cool. They had all of these opportunities to take feedback from people across all these iterations of the game. I know that one of our community members, Mr. Jerp, had played one of the previous betas. I think the open beta, because I'm pretty sure he hadn't purchased the game. I believe he played the open beta a year ago, and he was asking us about some of the mechanics in there, which are now very different. And good thing. But he was like, yeah, I don't know. They had, these turrets that you put down were really squishy and it seemed like a waste of time. And it doesn't feel like that anymore based on what we played. But I understand where his frustrations would have been, because if that's how it would have been like during the 1.0 release, I would have been pretty frustrated. Because I could see where, like, I could easily imagine where that game was before based on what he was telling us. And I'm glad that they changed that before the 1.0 release, because a lot of games come out 1.0, everybody plays it for the first time ever, and stuff's broken. And a lot of people will be like, hey, refund this game. Or I played for a few days and I'm never coming back to it. And when you have a chance to fix your game based on feedback beforehand, everyone's happier. Everyone's happier. So I'm really glad that game has been able to use that cycle that it's chosen to see some success. And the fact that it's on every platform, every major platform on day one is great. There's so many games that we recommend here in our community that are only for PlayStation or only for Nintendo Switch. So even though this doesn't yet have cross-play and cross-progression, they said it will, but I'll be excited to tell you some more about that game next week. But yeah, that's Endless Dungeon. I thought it was just a great, nice example of how this can go well. I think they just nailed it for how to use a beta and early access, both for feedback, for marketing, and making everybody happy in the end. This is a game I would have considered, if I had been super excited about it a year ago, I would have considered buying the special edition with the art book and soundtrack and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw you guys playing that in Discord. I was just like, oh my gosh, I want to play.
Well,
I don't have it though.
Well, we had just.
I will be getting it though.
Good to hear. We had just been playing on last week's show. You, Vilas, and I played From Space, which is also a twin stick shooter. They're both twin stick isometric shooters. They both have different strengths. I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think I liked Endless Dungeon better, but I don't think I enjoyed both of them, and I don't think it's like an either or situation.
Yeah, I liked From Space a lot. It's just that the onboarding was kind of confusing, and like the first time we played like the first level, it was really frustrating because we didn't know what was going on and how to do stuff. But once we got the hang of it, I think it was a lot more fun. And I think that kind of tracks with our record too, because we didn't have a lot of fun playing Gang Beasts, but boy, did we have fun playing Party Animals.
Yes, totally. And even with I hadn't thought of From Space in the context of this conversation, but while we were playing that last week, we were trying to look up information about it, and we just couldn't find it. And I would say that that's another benefit of having some sort of early access period, because when people are able to spend time on your game, they can build up a Wikipedia for it or a guide or anything, where like when we were playing, there were items and stats that we had no clear definition of, and when we went looking for the answers, they didn't exist. There were not clear answers. We never found the answers to some of that stuff on the internet. And on one hand, it's kind of exciting because that doesn't happen very often, where you're like, wow, this game is like low key. Like there are not a lot of people who've played this before. But on the other hand, for people who might not be as patient as us, that's not so charming. It's like, hey, game, I need you to tell me what you're doing. You're letting me down by not defining what this is, by not answering my question. But that's where the players can kind of fill that gap, especially the ones who are passionate, constructive, and love doing that. So yeah, maybe From Space really just could have used a better early access period, or any. It seemed. I mean, there was some sort of people definitely played it before the 1.0. Or no. I think we determined that it was out on another platform. I don't know. It's all murky.
It really is. I mean, it seems like an imported mobile game, to be honest. It kind of does kind of feel that way to me. Like you could definitely play it like on a mobile.
Totally.
And it feels like the UI is mobile friendly,
Mm-hmm.
and the tooltips are designed to be read in such a way that like I think translates well to mobile. So it could be one of those things, But I mean, definitely it needs some information out there, because that was frustrating trying to figure out anything. And that's what I like about what you said. When we get all of this stuff, like all this time in the world to like play the game and learn together, I think that's really cool, especially in like such a formulative state where everything is so like, what's the word? Tumultuous. Things could just change at the drop of a hat.
Mm-hmm.
So getting that information out there as soon as possible, even when it has the ability to change quickly, just that education alone, I think helps get players involved. Like right now, I'm playing a game called Battle Crash, which I'll be playing later on stream today. And there's one person right now who is devoting their time to making the wiki. There's no information right now to have the wiki. And I remember when I was in all of the multiple tests that I did for Knockout City, contributing to their wiki as well. And I could have done this in a better way, but what I decided to do, because I like to do this in every game that has fashion and clothes and items, is buy all the fashion and clothes and items. That way I could use like my fancy graphics card with its high resolution and whatnot to upload like the high def resolutions, quote unquote, like not a screenshot of, like I'm not taking a picture with my phone or just like screen capturing and stuff. I'm taking the raw image from the game with like, my GeForce NVIDIA, and then sending the image to them so that they can have it for the wiki and stuff. However, that required buying freemium currency. So I invested a lot of money into that game because I think I bought everything that came out every day in the store for like the first
Oh, just everything? Is that all?
3 seasons
Oh,
for
that's
like
a lot. And that was in Knockout City?
Knockout City. Yeah. And I still didn't become a partner for that game. I'm so sad. I invested so much money and time.
You know what?
Anyway.
I paid my taxes, and I should be in this game. At least the
I need
name
to
in the
speak to your
credits.
manager. How dare you? Yes, put me in the credits somewhere. Monaco. How you doing?
How you doing? You know, like the another game I had on here, or actually I would back it up a step. Another game that we played briefly before the tragic news came out that this game is like not going to be around anymore is MythForce. We tried to play on Steam Next Fest a demo of MythForce. And so to me, that game wasn't even out yet because I'm playing a demo, right? But it turns out that game actually had been fully out on the Epic Game Store for a while. And I believe it was like $60. Whatever price it was like definitely more than I would have paid. But that was confusing because it's like this game actually was out this whole time. I just never heard of it, and it was exclusive to a different platform until today. So, I question what they internally defined the Epic Game Store version of the game to be. Was that basically an early access period? Did anybody who bought that game at full price at $60, were they basically just a pay to play tester?
Yeah. It was
Uh,
$30, by the way, on Epic.
was it $30? I
Yeah,
could have sworn it was more.
I just looked it up.
Well, because I think it's $30 now, but
Oh, yeah.
I think when we looked it up, when only the demo was out, I remember being shocked because I could pay $30 for that game, but I remember being shocked at how expensive it was on the Epic Game Store, where I was like, there's no way that's right, kind of thing. Because the game is fun, but I mean, it was, $60 is a lot of money. Either way, that was just an interesting thing where I'm like, huh, is this game out or not? Or like playing something that I'm under the impression that it's not even released yet, and someone's like, oh yeah, I played that 8 months ago on a different platform. I'm like, what? Then what am I doing? The game didn't really tell me that that's what was going on. Like, it almost feels disingenuous because I want to feel like I'm a part of the community building it, So when I don't know that there's a different version of the game out, it's not like a lot of players wouldn't care. But if I want to feel special in the context of our conversation, I really want to feel like my feedback matters. And I felt like that just was a missed opportunity in that case. And lots of studios have different goals, different amounts of resources. So that stuff's not, even gathering feedback can be expensive and difficult. It's a lot easier said than done. But another game that rewarded my feedback was Darkest Dungeon 2. But the tricky thing is that I enjoyed giving my feedback on this. Early access came out like a year or a year and a half before the full release, which was maybe last year. I don't know. Time's weird. I didn't look it up. But I was playing that game for a long time before the 1.0 release came out. I intentionally even avoided playing it because I didn't want to make too much progress in case things changed. And change they did. So, by the time the 1.0 release came out, the game was very different in a lot of ways. Where, as I was playing, I was like, you know what? I loved Darkest Dungeon 1, and I have, as I'm playing it, I'm like, and I'm enjoying my time with this early access on the Epic Game Store of Darkest Dungeon 2. But to my friends, as I'm playing it, I'm like, if you're not sure that you're gonna like this, don't buy it yet. Like, the game's not out yet. And generally speaking, I don't think people should pre-order. Like, generally speaking, don't pre-order a game that's not out yet because you're paying for a product you haven't seen. And, I've talked at length that I think if you buy a pre-order, you're giving up your ability to really be mad about the quality of the game that you get. That's an oversimplification of my opinion, but when you pre-order a game, you're giving a developer a free pass that you'll just accept whatever they give you because you already paid for it. So with early access, which I paid $20 full game price for Darkest Dungeon. I played it for a while. I happily gave my feedback because some things were broken, some things just weren't very fun, some things were very confusing. And occasionally, some stuff can be confusing in the full release, but it's very different now, and it continues to really listen to its players' feedback. Every time they come out with a new patch, the feedback's been great. We could do a whole episode on great feedback and how games have changed over time. When I was thinking of, is it Knockout City went through something, right, where it's either like not being supported anymore, like, am I making this up? Like, didn't something happen with
No,
them?
they basically shuttered the game because like they're not supporting it anymore. Like the servers are offline and everything. Like it's completely done. I think this is the only instance in which you could use the term dead game because
Yeah.
I mean it's no longer live. However, the community did come back and say, hey, now we have community driven servers. They're community dedicated. You just have to find the link somewhere, which Knockout City, the official Twitter, did share. So if you're still interested in playing the game,
Oh,
you can go to their Twitter and download the community client and continue to play the game. However,
that's cool.
the studios, Velen Studios, the official developers of the game, do not support it like anymore. Like their servers, their dedicated servers are like offline. You can no longer use your information on that you garnered on those servers to like log in.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. What's the opposite of early access? Like post-mortem access? you know?
That's a good question.
Uh,
Like because what would this be?
right. It was almost like when the WoW servers, you had vanilla WoW, and then you had the expansion, and you could no longer play vanilla WoW, so people made their own servers where you could. Of course, since then, now WoW Classic exists, so, it's a moot point. But, it is funny playing like a version of a game that just doesn't exist in the wild anymore, like officially. Because I really wanted to play
Honestly,
Knockout City. I kind of missed my opportunity.
no, you could just do the late access, I guess. Actually, considering late is a term for, the passed on,
Yeah.
late access I think could work here as a direct opposite to early access. It's late access, it's a dead game,
All
so
right, community night. We're playing some late access Knockout City. Man. Well, that what an interesting situation. Well, so like with Darkest Dungeon, I played it for a long time, and then the 1.0 came out, and it was better. The quality was good, yada yada yada. I will say my perspective on the risk of a studio taking that route. Yes, their game's much better. I'm very glad they did it. I think if they hadn't done that, their game might not have been very good when it fully released. It probably would have had bad reviews. But that's not what happened. And when it had its full release, a bunch of places, including IGN, gave it like a 9, 8s and 9s out of 10. That's really good. So good for them. I think that was a good decision. But the other side of this is that when I would tell people, oh, the Darkest Dungeon full release just came out, people would respond with, well, didn't that come out like ages ago? And the answer is, kind of, yeah. So like when you have this long, especially continuous early access period, it can be, it seems like it's tough from a marketing standpoint to let people know that this one is different. Like, no, this is the real release. That was the pre-release. Okay, sure.
all
No,
right, grandma, let's get you to bed.
yeah, right. No, this is the Wii U. It's different. Uh, so there is like a risk to it. There are pros and cons. And I think that's one of the reasons why, one of many reasons why every studio doesn't do this. But I think about that a lot, where when I did tell people I was excited about Darkest Dungeon 2, they were confused when I would say that, like, paraphrasing here, that it just came out. Because it's like, but how did it just come out? I thought Baldur's Gate 3 was out like 2 years ago. I thought it was fully released because I saw so many people playing the early access, like streaming it. And every time I watched them, everybody's characters looked different. They were always in different areas and stuff. And so like, I was like, oh wow, there's a ton of game here. The game must be out. So when people were excited about it, I was just really confused at why you were excited about a game that came out like 2 years ago. And they're like, no, it hasn't actually released yet. I'm like, what are you talking about? But it's a funny conversation. And you remember the cycle, yeah? Where
I try not to.
we played a version of that game that was pretty cool, and then they completely overhauled the game and said, now this game is like Escape from Tarkov. It is a completely different game from what you played before. Not knocking Tarkov. Plenty of people liked the new version of the cycle. But here at Party Invite, we really did not like the
No.
cycle in its final iteration. And then it got shut down. Not enough people played it because when it switched to the new version, some people came back and played like we did, and some new people played and gave it scathing reviews based on stuff just not being where it needed to be. And so the game failed because it couldn't overcome those initial bad reviews on its quote unquote 1.0 release, even though that game was fun and playable like a year beforehand, like at least a year.
Yeah, and I do wonder like what kind of feedback led them, if any feedback at all, or maybe it was just like an executive decision, led them to change the game so drastically because the cycle and the cycle frontier, which is what it became after they made the change, are like two different games. It's not even like two sides of a different coin affair. They were literally two different games.
Yeah,
So I mean, if they wanted to go the Tarkov route, why not keep the cycle, and then, use whatever they learned from the cycle to make a spiritual successor to the cycle, which would then be the cycle frontier. And then maybe by that point, they would have seen enough homework to like maybe iterate on it in a better fashion.
right. Well, I tell you what, there's a lot of stuff we could talk about. I know we've got some more stuff written down here, and Odysseus brings up a good one in chat that I want to mention. But let's make sure to hit some of these other things before we wrap up here, because we have been talking for a little bit, but this is a fun conversation. We talk about this
Yeah.
off stream a lot. Because you play so many betas in all their different forms, and a lot of us in here just play a lot of things that are in what I would lovingly call an unstable condition, stuff that's not really, well, okay, so the one that Odysseus here in chat mentioned, Odysseus and a bunch of us play a lot of survival games that are in early access. 7 Days to Die has been out for like 7 years. I think it's now in beta. I think it just hit beta in the last like year, but it's been in alpha for like 6 years. What does that even mean?
Elite Dangerous.
Yeah, Star Citizen.
Or Star Citizen, thank you.
Like
That's the right
what?
one.
Well, both of them. Elite Dangerous was kind of a similar situation, especially since they're both space sims. And 7 Days to Die and Project Zomboid, both zombie games, both in early access of varying versions forever. Like Zomboid is still, I don't know, like at a certain point, is it even worth saying you hit a 1.0? I don't even think it would be, because if the whole purpose, like from a philosophical standpoint, if the whole purpose is that you're constantly developing the game based on player feedback, then why even call it anything else? Because if it's constantly in a state of change and the developers embrace that like they do with 7 Days and Zomboid, then what does releasing a 1.0 even mean?
Yeah, because at that point, it's just going to be like 1.0, and then 1.1, and then 1.13, and then 1.2, and like
And then
it's almost
Overwatch
it's almost
2,
like oh no, 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 no.
it's like which version? The only one of these exists now, and it just overwrote the other one, kind of like the cycle. It's very different situations, but
I mean,
some
Counter Strike
similarities.
2 is kind of like that too. I feel I haven't
Oh,
played enough of
right.
either one to know, but like to know for sure like what are different between the two iterations. But from what I've seen, feedback wise, it's just enough to cause concern among the esports industry.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it plays out. But I mean, like slapping a 2 on something at this point is I don't know what that means anymore.
Well,
Like
or
after Overwatch
slapping a
2.
1. To slap a 1
Yeah, yeah,
on them,
yeah.
It's just the same thing. It's like at a certain point, what is the significance of it? And I think the bigger the company, the more complicated that question is. So with Overwatch and the cycle, both of them had a lot of money behind them. They're both AAA titles, or at least the cycle was portraying itself as a AAA game.
It's sort of like a AAA platform, I guess. Would you call Epic that?
Oh, well, I mean, Epic has tons of indies too. I don't know if I could say that's like saying if like what is Valve? I guess they're
Yeah.
AAA, but
This is a topic
they
we should explore
also,
later.
yeah, because
I think that's a good
they also make like The Lab on VR, which seems indie AF. But
which
yeah,
is very fun, by the way.
it is very fun. The longbow game rules. But yeah, there's a lot going on there. But like when there's smaller companies like these survival game devs, Zomboid and 7 Days to Die, they don't seem to care about coming out with a 1.0 release. And I think that's probably the right move, because who cares? Because with them making a 1.0 release, is that going to change their reputation with people? Are suddenly a lot of people going to discover the game the moment they flip the switch that says, hey, add a 1.0 to the end of our name? In some cases, maybe. I'm not a marketing expert, but with a game like that, I would assume no. This game's been out for 7 years already. Odysseus says in September they came out with Alpha 21, the 21st version of the game.
So well, shoot, maybe they'll finally get to beta at like the 26. They'll go through all 26 iterations,
yep.
like the alpha, and then there's the beta 1, and then 26 more. So it's.
I love it. I think
a super meta approach. I think
the Zomboid is at like 14 or something. So that's the rule. Once you get to the end and you circle back and you're like, okay, we got to make the number go up now. Let's see. You've got a couple games that you haven't mentioned on here. I think I've pretty much spoken my piece on all the games that I wanted to. You've got a couple on here. You've got the finals. You've got Naraka Bladepoint. You want to talk about those?
I will, but I did want to mention, since we were talking about the ones that like last forever, how the first game when we talked about this topic, like when we were like talking about this topic when we wanted to do it, and we're just like, okay, well, what games did we not realize were out because they've been out, quote unquote, for like the last ever? The very first one that came to mind for me was Splitgate. And people, when that game first was announced coming out, literally it was like a meme on like the tweet. It was just like, okay, wasn't it?
Wasn't it already out?
Wasn't
right.
Are you guys paying attention? Like, marketing guy, are you feeling okay? Because people didn't realize that it was still technically in early access, and that is what is like blurring the line between early access and like these other forms of like testing periods. Because I think it was like May. It was May of the year of our good Lord 2019, which was like the best year, as we all recall. Definitely nothing happened at the end of that year that threw the world into entire chaos. Really great year. It was on PC because they had 2 different early access / beta periods for PC and console. I'm just going to be speaking on PC because I haven't played on console. I know it came out for the Switch. This is very rare. And I think the only
Splitgate came out for the Switch? Was it fine? Did it play?
I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
like I feel like games like that, like Fortnite and Road Company, like which are also on the Switch. Like, do people play them there? I don't know. I mean, obviously they do, or else
I mean, they'd have to.
They'd have to.
I mean, they'd have to work just because of the reputation of those companies. I thought it was dumb when Call of Duty Mobile came out, but I have some friends who, like, the day it came out, they were like, this is amazing. I was like, wow, okay.
I've heard someone say it's the best iteration of modern Call of Duty yet.
Wow.
And this is before like like the the reboot of the remake of the remaster of Modern Warfare 2 came out.
Yeah, because the 1.0 of Modern Warfare is not out yet.
These numbers are just weird, ridiculous at this point.
Right.
Because if you throw in remakes and remasters, it's a whole different conversation. But anyway, it came out in May of 2019. So this was like a couple of years ago, almost half a decade. I mean, wait, is math? Anyway, a couple, like 2019. And then a year over a year later, it was announced that it would be in early access. So the like early access, indefinite beta is what they called it. Indefinite beta. What does that even mean? I don't know. Multiverses did the same thing, and then they took it offline and said the real release is coming out next year. Like it's getting crazy right now.
Murky.
So this was indefinite beta. It was in like 2 years.
Yeah.
This was 2 years later that announcement was made. And so indefinite beta, this is when people were just like, okay, the game's out now because it's been out for so long that it has to have been out. And then over a year later, in the September of the following year, they made that announcement, is when they made the 1.0 announcement.
Wait. So there was a year between what 2 announcements?
So it came out in May of 2019. That was the first early access. And then a year later, that following August, it was in indefinite beta. And then a year later, it was announced to be fully released. So
and then a year after that, they said, actually, we're going to stop
Right.
supporting this one. We're gonna move on to our new project. It's like, wait, what?
So what was the point? What was the point? It was, I don't even think it was like a full year. They were just like, yeah, we're just not feeling it anymore. We're just going to take everything that we learned from this
On to our new
indefinite
project.
beta and make it into the spiritual successor, which is why I wanted to talk about it right now, because Cycles Frontier was, that could have been a spiritual successor in the way that Splitgate, I think it's 1049 games, or 1047 games,
Mhm.
um, is doing what they're doing with Splitgate and making their spiritual successor, because they're still going to say they still said it's going to be like a Portal Wars experience, which is the project name for Splitgate was Portal Wars, because it was basically Portal and like, I think
Oh yeah, it's totally Halo.
Halo, but I don't want to say Halo Wars. Is that a real game? Is that
That is a
Halo
game,
Wars?
but that's a real time strategy.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know why they called it that, but they did. But
Uh,
it's definitely Portal meets Halo.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
they're taking what they're learning from this and making it into their new Splitgate. It's probably going to be Splitgate 2, judging from
It's
Overwatch. And like it's Splitgate 2.
surprise. We were actually developing this the whole time.
Yeah. So like I don't, well, it's still a very popular game. I mean, you can log in and you can find games very quickly. The player base is still there. I think people are still active in the Discord as well. And there are even still competitions for it. So
Oh, I
like
bet people will
service
be
is still
playing that
ongoing.
game for a while. It's good, you know.
Yeah, it's very fun and it's very easy to pick up. And if you enjoy Portal, you will love this game because the Portal mechanics are so great. The mechanics are the same. Momentum carries. You can zip zap zoop around. It's fun. But the fact that it's still being supported is what is interesting to me, because with a game like The Cycle, they closed it down. Knockout City, they closed it down. I mean, it didn't have like eternal access like Splitgate did. Um, but I think the eternal access in this instance benefited them. I think they're like, it sucks that we got that full on like 3-year test period and then only like 3 months of full game 1.0 release. But at the same time, in a positive light, it was a learning experience for the studio, which was comprised of like Halo fans and things like that, right?
Mhm.
And a loom from the staff of, what is it, Bungie? Was Bungie the first studio, or is it Studio 343? That was the first.
Bungie originally, and then
Okay,
343.
so then Bungie, Alum, and then Halo fans alike collaborated to make 1047 games, and then now they're taking all of that experience
That's funny
and
that they
then
went
making their
from
next game.
Bungie to make a studio with a number in it when Bungie became a studio with a number in it. They're
I
like,
wonder,
if there's not a number in our studio, we'll never be able to compete.
when it first was like when they first announced the game and I saw 1047, I was like, I wonder if this is like some factorial of like 343 or something like that. Like, can you multiply or add some kind
What's
of
the area
343?
code? Like, what's the zip code that this place
Yeah.
was made in?
Like, is there some kind of like inside joke there that we don't get? Uh, so I thought that was funny. But I don't know. It feels almost like time wasted, except for that it's not, because Splitgate is still playable,
Mhm.
right? Like if they had done all that and then shut down the servers like they did Knockout City, I would have been mad, you know?
Yeah,
A lot of people invested their time into not only providing feedback, but just enjoying the game and making like a whole league around it. There was like an esports league for Splitgate. You
yeah.
could win money. There were teams. There was like a whole like community, like esports community around it. And then for it to suddenly shut down like that would have been awful. So I'm really glad that people could still play it today.
Yeah, same.
But that's the first game I think of when we have like eternal access like that, like indefinite betas. I think that's such an interesting phrase. It's almost like alternate truth, right? Or alternative fact is
Alternative
what it
facts.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indefinite beta. I was just like, okay.
Okay. Whatever you call it, you know.
But then those games like that kind of blur what it means to be in early access, right? And so that's what I have up here.
Yeah.
The finals, their first closed beta, which was a closed beta, but they called it an early access period. I believe that X Defiant also called their first closed beta an early access period, which lasted a lot longer than the 8 hours we got 2 weeks ago. And I'm still mad about that, but that's neither here nor there. And
But
then
you got
Naraka,
that exclusivity when it was only an 8-hour window, though, huh?
I mean, there's exclusivity and then there's just like redonkulousness. Like,
Like,
if you blinked, you would have missed it.
right? Like on a normal day, I wouldn't even have gotten off of work by the time that window had already closed. Like, bruh.
And that's what a lot of people were venting about. Like, they expressed their frustrations about during that time, like during and after that time. It's just like, what was even the point?
Right. Like, how much feedback do you think you got? And if you were stress
It
testing, why'd you pick a window where a lot of people couldn't even try it out?
They're just like, hey, 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 we got it. Just Ubisoft things, I guess. I don't know.
Uh, Chrome in chat says they got to stop making up all these terms. It ain't that serious, man. The
Or we
terms,
just need new ones that like better define what the obscure and muddy term has become.
yeah, because everything seems to mean everything. Just it depends who you ask, which really is like alternative facts, you know. Uh, it really is weird. Like it used to just be such a pretty well defined definition. If you said you were playing a beta, I no more questions. You know, certainly not about what the definition of a beta was.
Yeah.
But now it's all over the place, and it means so many different things. And like with this indefinite beta, it basically means that these games, certain games, just live in their natural state is this pre-release version. You know, and sometimes that doesn't matter, and some other times it does. Like with Splitgate, I don't know. Like you said, it's frustrating that this life cycle would be, let's say, 3 years long for Splitgate, but then only a year after they say, okay, we're finally ready to show it to you, they close up shop. Like, what?
Just kidding. You've been playing the full game all along. We're done now. Bye. See you later.
Right. So whatever. The game is still playable. This not the same, but I'm really waiting for Concerned Apes next game. They made Stardew Valley, and I'm waiting for the Chocolatier, whatever.
Like, oh god, Gravekeeper something, right?
Something. I mean, Grave's definitely not in the name, but you're
Is it not? Oh,
in the right window there. I want that game to come out, but they keep going back and developing more and more stuff for Stardew. I'm like, dag nabbit, just do the new project, move on. But
yeah, if you get that Stardew Valley 2 out there.
It's like Todd Howard said about Skyrim. He's like, we'd stop working on it if you guys would stop buying it. So I can't really blame him. Anyway, it's it's complicated, and it will continue to be complicated. But like you said, I hope somebody comes out. I hope some big company makes a splash and says like, hey, we're planting our flag. This is what this is going to be called from now on. It's some term that nobody's using right now, and it's going to mean this thing,
Yeah. I think the important parameters to consider when coming up with that is like, is this early access, quote unquote? Is it going to be free? Is it going to be like the $20 like Steam early access that we see for everything all the time to like, fund their game? Is it going to be like short term, long term, 3-day, week long, month long, indefinite, quote unquote? Like what is the time frame and how much does it cost are going to be the most important parameters I think we can establish when coming up with these terms, if anyone bothers to do the work to do that.
Yeah. Well, cool. Have we covered everything? Yeah.
I think so. I just want to point out though that starting today, speaking of the finals, their next early access period is now. I mean, it could be live now. I don't know the hour, but I know the day, which is today, October 26th. And it will be lasting until the 5th of November. So if the finals captured you with its first early access, every time I say this now, it's going to be air quotes. Then go back in and download the playtest again and have a ball. I guess there's like some new stuff that they're adding in there, and it's going to be cool. It's going to be fun. Awesome. I still had a really good time playing the finals, so I thought it was like a new, refreshing take on like the extraction shooter sort of affair.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed watching that. I could definitely hop in and get it. Oh, you know what? This is unrelated to this conversation, but I just want to say it. It looks like cross progression is finally coming to Apex Legends, like on Halloween, I think, which is awesome because I completely forgot the game didn't have cross progression until he said that, and I would have been pretty frowny face when I logged on and realized I didn't even have my favorite characters unlocked. So,
we'll have to celebrate.
We will. But yeah, the RIP the Hyenas game. That,
oh my gosh,
it just didn't.
Yeah, not for all the games that didn't even make it to the period, right?
Right. Oh, and like a Haunted Chocolatier was the name. So you, Grave Digger, Chocolatier. If the Grave Digger was making the chocolate, his hands is all I'm saying. But let's see. Any last words? We got Halloween coming up, but I will say the spooky season is still going to be around for us. We haven't even started dipping into the spooky games we originally intended to play. Because for me, the spooky season is basically October through the end of December. Prove me wrong. If as long as the days are this long and the trees look dead, then it's spooky season, my friends. So look forward to some more of that. We'll be playing some stuff in our community, more Midnight Ghost Hunt. We're gonna play Inside the Backrooms, 4-player co-op game, a lot of fun, and a bunch of others. And then after this, I'm gonna be playing after this stream, or sorry, after this podcast on the rest of the stream, I'm gonna be playing a game called Scarlet Hollow. It's a narrative, spooky narrative game that has a lot of people who are involved in the No Sleep podcast, my favorite horror fiction. And Sid, you'll be playing Battle Crush, yeah?
Yes, which is not spooky at all. And it has, guess what? That Greco-Roman mythology that we're all so like so used to now. I can't wait for them to add the Nordic ones.
You know, but you're playing it for the plot, right? For the
Yeah,
plot,
the plot. Some pretty robust plot.
pretty huge tracts of plot, huge plots of land. Thanks everybody for listening. You can find us on Discord at discord.gg/partyinvite-show. You can find our website, partyinvite.games, where you can find all of our releases. Also, you can watch the video version of this podcast on Spotify. You don't have to do audio only. So if you're a Spotifyer like me, you can see everything there is. Of course, this episode wasn't super video heavy, but some of them are. Yeah, Spotify's good for that these days. So
I didn't know that Spotify could do that.
all right, y'all, stick around and we'll be back. For everybody out in the world, we'll see you next Thursday. Bye.
Bye. Ooh, spooky happy Halloween.